I hate this feeling of them all around my mind, but I need to see it. How did Keith become this? I can feel my tribe mate, Hoda. I had expected her to choose to be my wife, but I feel it. She has become wife to Keith. Whatever. It is unimportant. I am Treg, and I have 4 wives already, and at least 6 when I am done with this game. He is a strong warrior, and I need to learn his strength. I feel all the other weaklings, though. Bah! Weak! But they provide in their own ways to make up for it. Keith's song begins again, and I feel things shift around me, and I see my first view of this earth. For such a warrior, I expected a stronghold, but it is anything but. The sun is bright on this house, and I see farms back behind it, lines of trees to protect from the wind between fields, and a warm breeze flows outward. And then I see him, a child, pedaling furiously on some contraption, a bag clutched in his hand, his knuckles paling from how hard he holds it. A tithe for his father, something to instill pride, though the memory does not remember what is inside. I follow the boy as he comes off of the contraption, letting it fall away as he sprints into the house, and suddenly a sharp, loud bang fires off. Something is wrong. The sound is incredibly loud. The force of it I can feel even from here. But no birds stir, no rodents scurry, and I follow the boy, and something feels wrong about what I am seeing, what I am hearing, like something screams already, but is muffled, and I can smell the blood already. The boy proceeds up the stairs, still sprinting with his tithe in hand, and the door to his father's chambers open, and the scent does not change. The whole scene is frozen in that moment, no birds chirping. Something is wrong, this still image. This scene is not real, and I feel the press of minds, Val calling out for me to halt, but I will not have things hidden from me. And I step forward, and I feel it tear, the whole world ripping apart around me. The scene is changed. The sound. It was not made outside the house. The boy did not enter after. He entered as his father took his own life, and I felt the minds shift, and the words of Keith's song pierce the vision.
You can't kill me if I'm already dead, buried alive by the things that they've said I killed myself, but no one knows.
I felt a hand, but not in the shelter, the yurt that we occupied. Azoku. I watched as he stepped into the room with a screaming child crying out for his father to wake up, and Azoku knelt beside him.
Oh, child, no one should have seen this. This is not your fault.
He laid his hand on him, and the scene faded. Amongst the others, I could feel the trills. They were gaining power from this somehow, but there was no time to think. Scenes whipped by, the boy at the funeral, comforting his grandparents. And something was wrong, but not the scene. The adults. They gave empty platitudes, and they spoke about him when they thought he could not hear.
How do you even get over seeing something like that? He's so young.
What happens to him now?
First his mom, then his dad. Kid's gonna end up in a rubber room.
The boy's grandparents were broken down, inconsolable in seeing the body of their child. And then I felt Dukatha enter, hopping along to sit next to the boy. Why is she the only one? Where are his friends, his family? Why is no one showing him how to grieve? Why is he the one comforting? The scene shifted, and the rabbit folk faded, and I watched as he stood off by himself, watching his father being lowered into the ground in a brown box until another grandfather stepped up to him, this one hardier, with thick hair over his lip, calloused hand laying on the boy's shoulder, and knelt down.
Hey there, Bit. Tell you what, me and Grandma had us a talk about it, and we'd like you to come live with us. How's that suit you?
The boy trembled, bitter tears coming out.
Pop. I want Dad back.
I watched the boy break, but this is wrong. I felt a similar feeling from Hoda. Where were the other family? Why was his tribe not coming together for him? 2 ceremonies for a corpse, and none of them to take him as ward except for an old man and woman. Where were the tribe's children? Even their shaman seemed more concerned over the dead one. Hoda stepped forward, praying over the boy as was her place as shaman. The scene fell away, and more scenes came past. The boy grew, his pop teaching him to hunt, to farm, to ride. But I felt my anger building. His tribe pulled away from him, pulled back. They said the right words, expressed sorrow at the loss, but they all held back from him, like they might somehow catch his grief, like a disease. It kept going, increasing as his grandparents died, one after the other. And steadily I watched as members of our new tribe stepped forward to be with him in those moments. The rage welled up within me, growing by the moment. Again and again, I bellowed out, breaking the connection, and shoved aside those in my way as I stalked from the building, hearing the words of Keith from his stage. As these judging eyes surround me, and silence tearing me apart, only seeing to the surface, they refuse to see my heart. I stalked across to one of the empty shelters, taking shelter from the storm raging around, and I screamed. I paced, and I felt the insane rage within my chest. I needed to fight. I needed to let this out before it could stain my spirit. I ripped the hatchet from my belt and put everything into hacking into one of the logs that were used for seating. I swung again and again, putting every bit of my anger into the act, when I heard the door bang open. Val. She stepped inside.
Are you okay, Treg?
I threw the hatchet into what was left of the log.
Fuck your entire species.
She stepped back as I stepped forward, shocked.
Look, I get it.
They abandoned him.
She shook her head in that negative way the humans used.
No, they...
I slammed a fist into a pillar.
Don't lie to me. I saw it with my own eyes. His whole tribe left him to rot, save for one old man and woman who were too old to be caring for a young boy. Where were his friends? Where was his shaman to heal his spirit? Where was anyone for him?
Val teared up and stayed mute.
My world may be savages, but we never would have left a child like that.
I pushed past, exiting the shelter to go back.
And I won't abandon him now.
I stood on the stage, helping Keith to continue with directions for operating the smartphone. I have been the guard to Her Majesty, Queen Marilla, for as long as I've known her, and I can feel her mind in here as well. Before these games began, the thought that there was someone more ambitious than her never entered my mind until I met Keith. When we joined his tribe, I contacted our council to see what he had said, but instead of simply telling, the council had shown me the video of Keith's proclamation. Bruised, battered, and bleeding, he should have been on the ground, but he was not. He stood, defiant to his core, as he called out for everyone to band together and threatened the Game Master, a man he had no way to reach, as he claimed that he would protect us all. As I watched the memories flood through his childhood, I cannot help but think that there are only a rare few of my people who would be able to get up from such repeated loss. And now, we come into territory I am far more familiar with. He stands in a room, a barracks, at attention with scores of other men, all dressed identically to him, their hair even cut to be the same. This life, a soldier's life, I am intimately familiar with. The one who will train them enters loudly, yelling, and throws a metal bin down the center of the room, and as it bounces, it looks as though it will bounce and strike one of the other recruits. When Keith breaks attention, taking one step forward, catching it, and setting it upright to his side. The one known as Drill Sergeant crosses the room in driven strides to stand toe-to-toe with Keith.
Who told you to step out of formation, Private?
Keith was unfazed.
No one, Drill Sergeant.
Then why were you out of formation, Private?
Every word was being screamed, and I saw as other recruits flinched, unused to the force of the commands.
Because the trash can would have struck Alcott, Drill Sergeant.
Keith came back unfazed. The drill sergeant stepped back for a moment, reassessing the recruit in front of him, his voice dropping from the screaming.
And what is your name, recruit?
Keith maintained eye contact while staying at attention.
Specialist Morehouse, Drill Sergeant.
Specialist Morehouse, drop and give me 20 push-ups for being out of formation.
The order lacked the yelling element, a slight acknowledgement that I understood. Keith had disobeyed the order, true, but had done it for the sake of his fellow soldier, a trait to be admired. Keith called out his recognition of the order and did his exercises. Others in the room would join him as the drill sergeant told them what is going to happen to them in their basic. This is basic training? All mother be good for whomever got considered for the elite training. The scene shifted to later in the same night, with everyone lined up in front of a bank of devices. It took a few runs at it, but I came to understand. These devices were used to contact the families of the recruits. Oh no. Keith stood at the back of the lines and held up a hand, calling out to the drill sergeant.
Drill Sergeant!
The drill sergeant strode over to him in that same uniform step.
You will get your turn to the call at your parents, Specialist Morehouse.
Quieter, Keith responded.
My parents are dead, Drill Sergeant.
The older man lost a step, and a couple of the recruits around Keith swiveled their heads at the statement.
Then call your grandparents, Specialist.
Also dead, Drill Sergeant.
Keith responded, with all the emphasis of someone noting the weather on a normal day. The drill sergeant said nothing for a moment, then made a motion with his hand.
Specialist, you may return to the barracks.
His voice had lost that edge that he had prior as he gave the order. It had taken the energy out of him, and Keith simply gave his affirmation of the order and headed off in the direction of the barracks. The scene shifted again to Keith sitting alone in his barracks at the foot of his bed, breaking out the tools to polish his boots, just concentrating on the activity, and I felt the tears well up in my own eyes. He was alone in the world, all of his worldly possessions contained in a single footlocker. It wasn't fair. I saw it in Keith's eyes, the determination to push past it, and they were not the eyes of a simple recruit. His eyes were those of a veteran already, one who had fought and lost, who had overcome much, but his body was little more than a child's, and I felt it as Traig's mind rejoined, and the Goal stepped forward to join him there, taking a seat on the footlocker beside him as the scene dissolved. More scenes rushed past, Keith being given recruit command of the division, helping to build others up, and I heard Keith's song.
I've come to understand that tragedy's a second chance. My dying breath is where I was born. Now I'm stronger than my storm.
The scenes continued on, Keith completing his basic training and heading off to learn the medical. He pushed himself further than anyone else around him, helping those who faltered even as his own pain was left to him repeatedly. But the greatest change was in those who would come to be his friends, built amongst those who served with him, as he met and fell in love with Kendra and found solace and family. But I knew how this story went, and I could take no peace in his joy. He approached the relationship with all the ardor of someone dying of thirst. Would a mountain spring? His joy was beyond anything I'd felt in my life, and it would be ripped away from him in the cruelest manner possible. For the first time, I found myself questioning if I was strong enough to keep standing my vigil. By assignment, he became stationed with a specialized group within his army, referred to as Rangers, and trained alongside them. He pushed himself harder, forcing them to recognize Keith as one of their own. He did not simply complete the training, but placed highly within it, pushing his own body to the breaking point again and again, to prove his worth to no one but himself. He trained tirelessly with weapons he would not use. What? I became aware as I watched. Keith was a combat medic, charged to go onto the battlefield, but to do so without carrying a weapon to defend himself with. There were rules of war that stipulated him a technically protected status, and while he could use a weapon, if he did so, he would not be afforded those protections. Keith's position was to run into a battlefield unarmed even as war raged around him, and finally, his determination clicked into place in my mind. He would put himself to the hazard time and again, to save others, to make sure no one understood how he felt, because he knew there was only one way to understand, and he would not wish that fate even on his enemies.